The morning sun cast a warm glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood as 80-year-old Evelyn stepped out into her backyard, a bag of birdseed in hand. She moved slowly, but with a sense of purpose, as she made her way to the old oak tree where she had been feeding the local birds for decades. Evelyn cherished this daily ritual, a soothing moment of connection with the natural world amidst the hustle and bustle of modern life. As she sprinkled the seed around the base of the tree, a small flock of sparrows and robins fluttered down, their cheerful chirps filling the air. Suddenly, the tranquility was shattered by the sound of a car door slamming. Evelyn turned to see her neighbor, Karen, storming across the lawn, her face twisted in a scowl. "What do you think you're doing?" Karen demanded, her voice dripping with accusation. Evelyn blinked in surprise. "I'm just feeding the birds, dear. It's something I do every morning." "Well, stop it," Karen snapped. "You're attracting pests and making a mess in my yard. I won't have it." Evelyn's brow furrowed in confusion. "But these are not pests, Karen. They're beautiful little creatures, and I've been feeding them here for years without any problems." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I don't care. It's unsanitary, and I won't tolerate it. If you don't stop, I'm calling the police." Evelyn's heart raced as she realized the gravity of the situation. The police? But Karen, surely we can find a reasonable solution to this. There's no need to involve the authorities. "Oh, I think there is," Karen retorted, already pulling out her phone. Panicked, Evelyn watched as Karen's fingers danced across the screen, her expression triumphant. Within moments, the faint sound of sirens could be heard in the distance, drawing closer with each passing second. Evelyn's hands trembled as she clutched the bag of birdseed, her mind racing with disbelief and fear. How had a simple act of kindness toward the local wildlife escalated into this crisis? She knew she had to find a way to defuse the situation before the police arrived, but the weight of Karen's hostility and the looming threat of legal action left her feeling powerless and overwhelmed. As the sirens grew louder, Evelyn's heart sank. She had never imagined that her beloved morning routine would lead to such a confrontation, and the thought of being hauled away by the police for the crime of feeding birds filled her with dread. With a deep breath, she steeled herself for the arrival of the authorities, praying that somehow, someway, she could find a way to resolve this conflict without further escalation. The sound of the police siren grew deafening as the patrol car pulled up to the curb, its lights flashing urgently. Evelyn's hands trembled as she watched the officers step out of the vehicle, their expressions stern and commanding. "Ma'am, we've received a call about a disturbance," one of the officers said, approaching Evelyn with a frown. "Can you tell us what's going on here?" Evelyn swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding. I was simply feeding the birds in my backyard, as I do every morning. But my neighbor, Karen, has taken issue with it and called you." The officer turned his gaze to Karen, who stood with her arms crossed, a look of self-righteousness etched on her face. "Is this true, ma'am? Are you the one who called us?" Karen nodded, her chin held high. "Yes, officer. This woman is causing a nuisance in my neighborhood. She's attracting pests and making a mess, and I won't stand for it." Evelyn's eyes widened in dismay. "Pests? These are not pests, officer. They're simply beautiful birds that I've been feeding for years without any problems." The officer held up a hand, silencing Evelyn. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint, and we need to investigate. I'm going to have to ask you to stop feeding the birds for now." Evelyn's heart sank. "But officer, I don't understand. This is my own backyard, and I'm not harming anyone. Surely there must be a way to resolve this without involving the law." The officer shook his head, his expression unrelenting. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we have to follow protocol. If you refuse to stop, I'll have to issue you a citation." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears as she realized the gravity of the situation. She had never imagined that her simple act of kindness would lead to such a confrontation with the authorities. Desperately, she turned to Karen, hoping to appeal to her sense of reason. "Karen, please, can't we talk about this? I don't want any trouble. I'm just an old woman trying to enjoy her morning routine. Surely we can find a way to compromise." But Karen's expression remained unyielding, her lips pressed into a thin, unforgiving line. "No, Evelyn. You need to stop, and that's final. I'm not going to let you ruin the neighborhood with your bird-feeding antics." Evelyn's shoulders slumped in defeat as she realized that Karen was unwilling to budge. With a heavy heart, she set the bag of birdseed down, knowing that she had no choice but to comply with the officer's demands. As the police car pulled away, leaving her standing alone in her backyard, Evelyn felt a deep sense of despair and disbelief wash over her. How had a simple act of kindness turned into such a bitter and unjust confrontation? Evelyn couldn't help but wonder what other challenges and indignities she might face in the days to come as the conflict with her neighbor escalated. With a heavy heart, she made her way back into the house, her mind racing with uncertainty and fear. As Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, the silence in her home felt deafening. The absence of the joyful birdsong that had once filled the air only served to amplify the weight of the morning's events. She stared down at her trembling hands, struggling to make sense of the surreal confrontation with her neighbor and the police. How could Karen have been so callous and unreasonable? Evelyn wondered. All she had wanted to do was bring a little joy and nourishment to the local wildlife, a simple pleasure she had indulged in for decades without issue. Yet, in the span of a few heated moments, her harmless hobby had been twisted into some sort of criminal offense, one that had resulted in the unwelcome involvement of the authorities. Evelyn's eyes welled with tears as she thought about the fear and humiliation she had experienced. The sight of the police officers, their expressions stern and unyielding, had been deeply unsettling. She had always viewed the law as a means of protecting the vulnerable, not as a weapon to be wielded against an elderly woman tending to her backyard birds. The more Evelyn reflected on the exchange, the more her sense of injustice grew. She had done nothing wrong, yet she had been made to feel like a criminal in her own home. The thought of Karen's smug, self-righteous expression as she called the police only added to Evelyn's anger and disbelief. With a deep, shuddering breath, Evelyn made a decision. She would not allow Karen's petty vindictiveness to go unchallenged. This was her home, her sanctuary, and she refused to be bullied or intimidated by a neighbor who seemed to care more about maintaining a pristine, bird-free yard than about the well-being of the local wildlife. Steeling her resolve, Evelyn rose from the table and began to make a plan. She would speak to the local authorities, appeal to their sense of reason and compassion, and fight to reclaim her right to feed the birds in peace. And if that failed, she would explore every legal avenue available to her to stand up to Karen's callous and unreasonable behavior. As she moved about her kitchen, Evelyn's determination only grew stronger. She would not be cowed or silenced, not by her neighbor's misguided sense of entitlement, nor by the heavy-handed intervention of the law. This was her fight, and she was prepared to see it through, no matter the cost. With a newfound sense of purpose, Evelyn set about making the necessary calls and preparations, her eyes alight with a fierce determination that belied her frail, elderly appearance. She would not back down, not without a fight. And in the end, she vowed, justice would prevail. In the days that followed, Evelyn's determination only grew stronger as she navigated the complex web of bureaucracy and legal challenges presented by her conflict with Karen. Armed with a stack of carefully documented evidence and a steely resolve, she made her way to the local police station, determined to plead her case. The officer who had responded to Karen's initial call listened intently as Evelyn recounted the events, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. She explained how feeding the birds had been a cherished daily ritual for her, one that brought her immense joy and connection to the natural world. She pleaded with the officer to understand that the birds were not pests, but rather beloved feathered friends that she had nurtured for years without incident. To Evelyn's relief, the officer seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, his expression softening with empathy. "I understand your frustration, ma'am," he said. "Unfortunately, we were simply following protocol and responding to the complaint. But I can see that this is more than just a simple nuisance issue for you." Evelyn nodded earnestly. "That's right, officer. These birds are like family to me. I can't bear the thought of being barred from feeding them. Surely, there must be a way to resolve this without involving the authorities." The officer scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Well, I'll tell you what. Let me see what I can do to talk some sense into your neighbor, Karen. Maybe we can find a compromise that works for everyone." Evelyn's eyes lit up with hope. "Oh, would you, officer? I would be forever grateful. Karen can be so stubborn, but maybe if she hears it from you, she'll be willing to see reason." The officer gave Evelyn a reassuring nod. "I'll do my best, ma'am. In the meantime, I would advise you to hold off on the bird feeding until we can get this sorted out. I don't want to see you end up with any more citations." Evelyn reluctantly agreed, her heart heavy at the thought of having to abandon her beloved morning ritual. But she knew that for now, playing by the rules was the best path forward. With a newfound sense of hope, she thanked the officer and made her way back home, already planning her next steps in the battle to reclaim her right to feed the birds. As she walked, Evelyn couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Would the officer's intervention be enough to sway the unyielding Karen? Or would the conflict only escalate, leading to further legal troubles and hardtack? One thing was certain. Evelyn was more determined than ever to stand her ground and fight for the simple pleasure she had enjoyed for so many years. This was her battle, and she was prepared to see it through to the end. In the days that followed, Evelyn anxiously awaited word from the police officer, her mind racing with a flurry of hopeful and fearful scenarios. Would he be able to reason with the obstinate Karen, or would her neighbor's relentless campaign to have Evelyn banished from her own backyard only intensify? Each morning, as Evelyn gazed out the window at the cluster of birds gathered around the oak tree, her heart ached with longing. She could almost feel their innocent eyes pleading with her to come out and provide them with the nourishment they had come to expect. The absence of her familiar presence and the sound of her gentle humming as she scattered the birdseed left a void that Evelyn found increasingly difficult to bear. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the officer's call came. Evelyn's hands trembled as she answered the phone, bracing herself for the worst. "Ma'am, I wanted to follow up with you on the situation with your neighbor," the officer said, his tone tentative. "I have to say, it was not an easy conversation, but I believe we may have reached a compromise." Evelyn felt a surge of hope rise within her. "A compromise? Oh, officer, please tell me more. What did Karen say?" The officer let out a deep sigh. "Well, it wasn't easy, but after a lot of back and forth, she's agreed to allow you to continue feeding the birds as long as you keep the area clean and make sure they don't spread to her property." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Oh, thank goodness. I can't tell you how much this means to me. I was so worried that I would never be able to enjoy my morning ritual again." "I'm glad we were able to work something out," the officer replied. "Just remember, ma'am, you'll need to be diligent about keeping the area tidy and making sure the birds don't cause any issues for Karen. If there are any more complaints, we may have to revisit this." "Absolutely, officer," Evelyn affirmed, her voice trembling with relief. "I'll be the most attentive and responsible bird feeder you've ever seen. You can count on me." As Evelyn hung up the phone, a wave of gratitude and elation swept over her. She had been prepared to fight tooth and nail to defend her beloved morning routine, but in the end, reason had prevailed. With a renewed sense of purpose, Evelyn hurried outside, the familiar bag of birdseed in hand, her steps lighter than they had been in days. As she scattered the seed around the oak tree, the birds flocked to her, their joyful chirps filling the air. Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling with a sense of peace and contentment. She may have faced a formidable challenge, but in the end, Her unwavering love for these feathered friends had won out. With a newfound resolve, she vowed to continue cherishing this simple pleasure for years to come. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn's daily routine of feeding the birds in her backyard resumed, but with a newfound sense of vigilance and caution. Mindful of the delicate truce she had reached with her neighbor Karen, she took extra care to ensure that the area remained meticulously clean and that the birds did not encroach on Karen's property. Each morning, Evelyn would step outside, the familiar bag of birdseed in hand, and commune with her feathered friends, their cheerful songs and fluttering wings a soothing balm to her soul. She took great pride in observing the vibrant community of birds that had come to rely on her generosity, watching as they flitted from branch to branch, seemingly aware of her unwavering dedication to their well-being. Yet, despite the joy she derived from these moments of connection with nature, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. The memory of Karen's callous disregard for the birds and her willingness to involve the authorities still weighed heavily on Evelyn's mind. She knew that at any moment the fragile peace could be shattered, and she would once again be forced to fight for the right to engage in this simple pleasure. As the days turned into weeks, Evelyn's vigilance only increased. She meticulously swept the area around the oak tree, ensuring that not a single seed or feather was out of place. She carefully monitored the birds' movements, always ready to intervene should they venture too close to Karen's property. It was an exhausting, never-ending battle, but Evelyn was determined to prove her worth as a responsible and considerate bird feeder. Occasionally, she would catch a glimpse of Karen peering out from her window, her expression unreadable. Evelyn would offer a cautious wave, hoping to convey a sense of goodwill and cooperation, but Karen's response was always the same, a curt nod, followed by the swift retreat of the curtains. Evelyn sighed, her heart heavy with the weight of the unresolved tension. She longed for the day when she and Karen could put aside their differences and find a way to coexist peacefully, but the scars of their previous confrontation seemed too deep to heal. Still, Evelyn refused to be deterred. She knew that her love for the birds, and her unwavering commitment to their well-being, was more powerful than any petty dispute with a neighbor. As long as she remained vigilant and respectful, she vowed to continue this daily ritual, cherishing every moment spent in the company of her feathered friends. With each passing day, Evelyn's resolve only grew stronger. She was determined to prove that her kindness and compassion could not be extinguished, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. And in the end, she knew that the birdsong that filled her backyard would be the sweetest victory of all. As the seasons began to change and the first crisp breeze of autumn swept through the neighborhood, Evelyn's daily ritual of feeding the birds continued with a renewed sense of purpose. Despite the lingering tension with her neighbor Karen, Evelyn remained steadfast in her commitment to caring for the feathered visitors that had become such an integral part of her life. Each morning, she would step outside, the familiar bag of birdseed in hand, and be greeted by the fluttering wings and joyful chirps of the birds. Watching them gather around the oak tree, their beady eyes fixed on her, filled Evelyn's heart with a sense of calm and contentment. In these fleeting moments, the weight of her ongoing conflict with Karen seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the simple, pure pleasure of nurturing these delicate creatures. Yet, as the days wore on, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Despite her meticulous efforts to keep the area tidy and the birds well-behaved, she couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that Karen was ever vigilant, ready to pounce on the first sign of misstep. One brisk morning, as Evelyn was carefully sprinkling the birdseed around the oak tree, she noticed a flicker of movement from the corner of her eye. Turning her head, she caught a glimpse of Karen peering out from behind her living room curtains, her expression unreadable. Evelyn's heart raced, the familiar feeling of dread washing over her. Had she done something wrong? Was Karen once again preparing to call the authorities and put an end to her beloved routine? Steeling her nerves, Evelyn offered a tentative wave in Karen's direction, hoping to convey a sense of goodwill and cooperation. To her surprise, Karen's expression softened ever so slightly, and she gave a brief nod before retreating back into the house. Evelyn let out a long, shaky breath, her shoulders slumping with relief. Perhaps, after all this time, Karen was beginning to accept the presence of the birds in their shared backyard. Or, at the very least, she had come to recognize Evelyn's tireless efforts to maintain the area and prevent any further conflicts. As the days passed, Evelyn found herself cautiously optimistic about the future. While the tension with Karen had not entirely dissipated, the sense of impending doom that had once hung over her daily ritual seemed to have lifted, if only slightly. Evelyn continued to be diligent in her care for the birds, but she also allowed herself to relax and savor the simple joy of their company, their cheerful songs once again filling the air without the constant threat of interference. In the end, Evelyn knew that her fight to protect her beloved morning routine was far from over. But as she watched the vibrant community of birds thrive under her watchful eye, she felt a deep sense of pride and accomplishment. This was her victory, hard-won and well-deserved, and she would continue to guard it with every ounce of her being. As the crisp autumn days gave way to the chill of winter, Evelyn's daily routine of feeding the birds in her backyard continued with a renewed sense of cautious optimism. The confrontation with her neighbor, Karen, had left deep scars, but Evelyn had refused to be deterred, determined to protect her cherished connection with the local wildlife at all costs. To Evelyn's relief, the tension between herself and Karen had begun to subside, though the two women still maintained a wary distance. Karen no longer peered out from her window with the same accusatory glare, and Evelyn's carefully orchestrated efforts to keep the area around the oak tree pristine seemed to have earned her a measure of grudging respect. Still, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. She knew that the fragile peace they had forged could be shattered in an instant, and she remained vigilant, ever watchful for any sign of Karen's disapproval. As the first flurries of winter began to drift down from the gray skies, Evelyn found herself drawn to the backyard with even greater frequency. The sight of the birds huddled together, their feathers puffed out against the chill, tugged at her heartstrings. She couldn't bear the thought of them going hungry, not when she had the means to provide them with sustenance. So, every morning, Evelyn would bundle up in her warmest coat and gloves, the familiar bag of birdseed in hand, and make her way to the oak tree. She took great care to ensure that the area remained clear of snow and debris, creating a welcoming oasis for her feathered friends. As the winter wore on, Evelyn found herself drawing strength from the simple act of feeding the birds. It was a ritual that grounded her, reminding her of the inherent beauty and resilience of the natural world. In the midst of the bitter cold and the ongoing tensions with Karen, the cheerful chirps and fluttering wings of the birds provided a much-needed respite, a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. And to Evelyn's surprise, she began to notice a shift in Karen's behavior as well. While the two women still maintained their distance, Evelyn could have sworn she caught a glimpse of a wistful expression on Karen's face as she watched the birds flock to the oak tree. Perhaps, in her own way, Karen too had come to appreciate the simple pleasure of observing the local wildlife, even if she was unwilling to openly acknowledge it. As the days grew shorter and the snow began to pile up, Evelyn found herself looking forward to her daily ritual with an ever-increasing sense of purpose. She knew that the battle with Karen was far from over, but in these fleeting moments of connection with the birds, she found the strength and resilience to carry on. For as long as she drew breath, she vowed, she would continue to nurture and protect the vibrant community that had come to thrive in her backyard.